What a wonderful world.
Welcome to See and Learn on Saba 2015. Once again, we had a great event this October, which was enjoyed by many people. This year, our opening night was held at Cove Bay and featured longtime contributor to See and Learn, Jennifer Rahn, whose presentation was about the birth of Saba.
Saba is the newest and youngest volcano in the Lesser Antilles. It's only 500,000 years old, which is very young in terms of geology. Because it's so young, erosion and weathering haven't worn away many of the original volcanic features. Saba began as a deep-sea underwater volcano, slowly growing and growing for tens of thousands of years until it reached the surface of the sea around 500,000 years ago. This was probably a very violent eruption as the hot magma interacted with the relatively cool seawater and air. Slowly over time, Saba grew taller and wider. The first center of a volcano formed on Saba above what is now the bottom. These were classic eruption styles, which included mile-high plumes of ash, and some of this ash rained down on Saba to form layers, along with pyroclastic flows, which are hot avalanches of lava fragments and volcanic gases. Also, many volcanic domes were formed where the lava is too thick and sticky to flow very far, and instead piled up thick and high around the vent. These are the named hills that you see around Saba. Around 100,000 years ago, an earthquake probably caused a huge avalanche and landslide on the southwestern flank of the central volcano above the bottom. Another eruption then occurred where most of the volcano was blown sideways towards where Ladder Bay and Fort Bay are now. Only a small part of a rim of that volcano is left, and you can see it to the north and northwest of the bottom. Since that event 100,000 years ago, Saba has been growing with the formation of even more lava domes. Currently, there are over 20 of these. The oldest ones include Peak Hill, Mascahorn Hill, and Fort Hill. Some of the newer domes include Great Hill, Paris Hill, and Bunker Hill. And the biggest one of these is Mount Scenery, which most people think is a volcano, but really it's just another dome on Saba. One of the most famous features on these hills is the whale and the whale tail, or the tent of Tent Bay if you're looking at it from the sea. This tent is a spine or spike that was preserved from the dome formation. Another well-preserved volcanic feature is the one and only lava flow on Saba. The airport and the roads up to Hell's Gate are on this feature, which was formed by the lava slowly flowing out of the volcano and spilling down the hillside. The 18 hairpin curves on the road are between lava levees. The levees can clearly be seen as small, narrow, long hills on either side of the main flow. As Saba has been building up over hundreds of thousands of years, it has also been wearing away through weathering, erosion, and waves. Gravity helps this process and is the cause of sediments moving downhill either slowly or very fast, as we have seen in some recent landslides. These waves first wear away the bottom of the hillsides. Over long periods of time, they form a notch at sea level. This can clearly be seen at the Wells Bay beach. Eventually, the hillside above the notch becomes unstable and can no longer support itself, and it collapses to form a cliff. This process happens over and over again to give Saba its dramatic cliff-lined coast. In the cliffs, like at Wells Bay, you can see thousands of years of pyroclastic flow deposits beautifully preserved layer upon layer. The rocks you see in the cliffs are lava bombs that flew through the air during eruptions to become embedded into the main flow of ash and rock. Lava bombs are ash fragments that are classified by size, and they are anything 2.5 inches or larger in diameter. On the hillside above us in Flat Point, you can see many lava bombs sitting on the ground. You can also see some embedded in the lava flow in the rocks at the tide pools. Another feature in that lava is the artistic-looking honeycomb salt weathering, which is called tephony. Saba is still an active volcano. You can see evidence of this where geothermal activity is occurring in several places. The most famous one is the Hot Springs dive site, where you can put your hands in the sand and feel the heat of the volcanic activity reaching the seafloor. Above water, we can see where this fumarolic activity has occurred when we see orange, yellow, and green colored volcanic rocks in many of the cliff sides around the island, including in Ladder Bay, behind the dive shops in Fort Bay, and in the gut leading down to Spring Bay. The most famous but difficult to get to area of ongoing geothermal activity are the hot springs below the sulfur mine. In small pools beside the sea, the water temperatures can reach 82 Celsius or 180 degrees Fahrenheit. Scientists will soon be monitoring the temperatures in the tide pools here, because if there were to be any changes in the temperatures, this would show renewed volcanic activity. This past June, Dutch scientists also placed 4 seismographs around the island to monitor earthquakes. Again, if a volcanic eruption were to occur on Saba, it would most likely be preceded by a swarm of local earthquakes, giving us warning.
Accurate knowledge regarding sustainable fisheries is important for local island economies. Expert Eric Bowman, who's studying conch populations in the area, explained about his research in this field.
Conch are important because they're a very important food source for many people in the Caribbean. It's the second most important benthic fishery after lobster in the entire Caribbean, so it feeds a lot of people. Also, conch is quite sensitive to environmental changes, and they need high quality water, clean water, they need a clean habitat. So if you lose your conch population, you can be pretty sure that something is very wrong in your ecosystem and you need to take action. At the moment I'm working in Statia on Saba and also on the Saba bank, but we're also working in Anguilla. And we're collecting data on distribution abundance of conch, but also for reproductive behaviors. We study the reproductive season and other important factors which can tell us how the populations are doing on these 3 islands. In order in Statia and on Anguilla to see if we can have a sustainable fishery, but on the Saba bank we want to basically figure out if the population has recovered since the closure of the illegal fishery in the mid-90s. The Saba bank was probably overfished. It has, at least in some parts of the Saba bank, recovered nicely. Other regions in the area are quite heavily fished, but there is no data from these regions, so we don't really know. But we do suspect that in the northeastern Caribbean there is a few areas at least that are overfished. For See and Learn today we took out a few very excited divers and we showed them basically how we do a conch research dive. And we looked at if there was any reproductive behaviors, and we looked at the frequency of these behaviors, but we also looked at the frequencies of sizes of conch. We wanted to see if we could find juvenile conch, intermediate conch, but also adult conch to see if the population is healthy and if there are adults which are able to reproduce, but also if there are young ones coming up and replenishing the population. The reason we're measuring the lip thickness of conch is basically to determine the age and to determine if they're sexually mature. As the growth in length will stop before maturity, we cannot use the length of the shell as an indicator of the age. It looked really nice. We found both young ones, adults, and intermediate, so it was very good. But something we did not do during the dive was to figure out how many conch per area unit we have. For that, we developed a towed video methods to be able to survey the deeper regions on the Saba bank and in Statia. And because conventional dive surveys will not allow us to go as deep as the conch are found in or on Saba bank and in Statia. So we developed this video method where we basically just video the seafloor, and we have lasers which indicate the width of the transect we're doing, and then we can figure out how many conch we have. And we've used this method on the Saba bank very successfully in the last year and a half, and we found quite decent, or I should say very nice densities of queen conch, of adult queen conch. Higher densities than there are found in many other regions in the Caribbean. So that's very positive. And we can say, at least for some regions of the Ceiba Bank, we have had a recovery in the population since the closure of the fisheries in the mid-90s. We don't really know exactly the extent of the fishery at that point, but however depleted the population was at that point, we are quite happy with the results from the abundance and distribution survey from the Ceiba Bank. At the moment we are collecting DNA samples from all of the Caribbean, and we're trying to figure out how the different populations are connected. And Ceiba Bank today is probably the only major area where adult conch populations are not fished whatsoever. So we're trying to look at the importance of the bank, but also other areas, in the supply of them, the areas themselves, but also other areas. So it may be, we're figuring out, but it may be that the Ceiba Bank is a very important area to supply at least the northeastern Caribbean with larvae. So we're figuring out with improved DNA techniques, and I'm really excited because it will teach us a lot about how different populations are connected, not only conch but also other fish species. So probably Ceiba is quite important to the other areas around Ceiba Bank.
We all get glimpses of bats flying around in the dusk hours. During his See and Learn field trips, Fernando Samal gave us an opportunity to see these creatures up close and explained how important they are for Ceiba's rain and dry forests.
Bats are very important in Ceiba for several different reasons. Probably the main one is seed dispersal. Studies have been shown that bats in forests are better seed dispersals than birds. And the reason for this is that bats don't have a problem to fly in open spaces, and some birds do. Also, the birds that tend to eat fruits, they eat it on the tree that they are on. Contrary to bats, who usually take the fruit from the tree and they go eat it somewhere else, usually in the roost. Additionally, the birds that eat fruit are usually perching birds, and they need to be on a perch to actually take a poo, while bats will do this while flying with no problem. So these studies have shown this. So a lot of these trees that you see in this beautiful island of Ceiba, in this forest, a lot of these trees most likely have been planted by bats. So that's very important. And also, a few bats will be pollinating some plants exclusively. And mainly this goes with the candle cacti. This big, large cacti, it's been also demonstrated that they get pollinated only by bats. So for Ceiba, that will be very important, because I would say your dry forest is very endangered. It's almost gone in the lower part of the island, and a few of these cacti are left. So it will be very important to make sure these bats are around so they can keep pollinating these cacti. So I decided to do, in my 2 field trips for the Ceiba See and Learn program, I decided to check on these bats on the dry area first. So we had a field trip to the airport area, and we surrounded with nets an individual of this species of candle cacti. This type of cacti is a keystone species for dry forests in general. Islands like Bonaire, Curaçao, Aruba, where I work, that don't have this kind of elevation and this amount of rain, basically they're dominated by this type of cacti. They are the only ones that produce fruit and provide water for the whole trophic web. I mean, all the different animals as you go, birds, reptiles, etc. Unfortunately, we didn't have any luck and we couldn't catch anything. But that's how it goes sometimes when you go out in the field and try to capture these individuals. Today, in order to try to catch some bats. We are higher up and deep in this rainforest, and we're going to be opening a few mist nets close to fruit trees, some passages, and one here in the middle of the forest. Hopefully we will catch some bats. Unfortunately, on Ceiba, there's been little studies made about bats, very little research and monitoring. The last study was made in 2007, and they found 4 new species of bats in only 11 nights mist netting around the island. So we'll take these 2 over there, check the other nets, and then there is habitat here for many different species. As you go higher in altitude, you can find different types of forests, so that most likely means that you can also find a high diversity of bats. And because there are so many islands close by, and it's well known that bats do fly between the islands across the ocean, probably the bat diversity is higher than we found until today. So that's the wingspan right there. Wow.
Whoa! What are these bugs?
This same group of scientists, they are convinced the fishing bat is also on Ceiba because it's all over the other islands in the Caribbean. And this bat flies between islands, so it will be very common. And Ceiba has all the characteristics where this species of bat could roost. So most likely it's also here. It will be really exciting if we could find a group of people willing to do bat conservation work on Ceiba and start with just the basic work like making an inventory of species, trying to do some echolocation to find some species that are not so easy to catch in the nets, and try to keep a monitoring program to keep an eye on the population. It will be very interesting if the islands of the North Dutch Caribbean become part of the Latin America and Caribbean Bat Conservation Network. This is an organization that was formed in 2007 and is being extremely successful in bat conservation all over South America and some of the Caribbean islands. We need to bring in more Caribbean islands, and if already Bonaire, Curacao, and Aruba are part of this network, and they have supported us enormously with research, with free consultancy. Some of the best experts in the world will be there to give us a hand in whatever we need regarding training or workshops, materials, etc. This network has an MOU signed with Bat Conservation International, so there is always some funding available. And this model of this bat conservation network is trying to be replicated now for Africa. So I truly hope to come back to Ceiba in less than a year, and it will be the greatest thing if when I come back we have already a bat conservation group formed by the islands of San Martin, Ceiba, and San Eustachius together as becoming part of this Latin American and Caribbean bat conservation network. That will be the best.
This year, See and Learn on Ceiba invited 15 scientists and experts to the island. As part of the program, each of them got involved with the local schools, where they organized special classes, workshops, and field trips. We asked a few of them why this is so important.
Science is probably one of the most important tools that a person can use to really understand the world around them. You think of science as being for figuring out these very confusing questions about the universe that are incredibly complicated and too complicated to understand, but in reality, you can apply science in your everyday life towards solving problems or trying to figure out how to best use your time.
I think it's a lot more effective and a lot more valuable long term to be able to connect with kids who don't know that they necessarily should be interested, and to ignite that interest and that passion in them about the place, but then about the various organisms in the ecosystem.
Well, for the kids, it's important to see what scientists do and that science is actually fun.
I think it's important to educate children about science at an early age, because that's when they start to formulate their ideas about the natural world and the world surrounding them.
They're looking around, they don't very see very well, so use sonar to look at things around them.
Interacting with the kids was really interesting, and I think they were very excited about moths and butterflies and learning more about nature. I was very happy to see them very interested and just enthusiastic about nature.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. There's a ton of energy, but it's really great when you see them really understand something or get really excited by something. Kind of an olive green, yellow green. As a scientist, we're really excited by science, and it's great to see children being excited by it as well. See and Learn's a great program to really make people understand what their environment is about and what they can do to better serve it. And the best way to find out how to help the environment or to care for the environment are through scientific approaches, but you don't need to be a full scientist to really approach conservation or anything like that. You can have the basics of understanding how the world works, and you can apply that towards environmental management and conservation efforts, and it really helps to let people know that there's things that they can do and there's things they can understand about the world that will help with conserving a beautiful place like Saba.
How do sharks help Saba's economy? So let's start, we're starting with...
As part of See and Learn, we held a school-wide debate within the housing system, and each group was looking at the conservancy debate from their point of view. So we had fisheries, we had Conservation Foundation, we had tourism industry, and we had the government. So the government would like to see increased revenue. The tourism industry would like to see more sharks in the waters so that we could get more tourists to go diving with them. So everybody has their own point of view, and they argued their point of view well as well.
And people come and they pay to go see sharks and other types of marine life.
It's very important to take the students out on field trips, because even though they think they may know the island, there are still parts of the island that they don't know yet. And especially if you put on the goggles or the glasses of the scientists, they'll see, hopefully, the island through their eyes and have a renewed appreciation for, where they live, this beautiful, gorgeous place.
Okay, it has eyes. Good. Keep talking. What else do you notice about snakes? Okay, they're covered with scales. Why do they have scales?
Whether we're on Saba or in the US or China or, wherever, there's this real need to connect people to the place that they live, I think, and to help them understand how all of the various pieces fit together. And so in a place like Saba, where there's still a beautiful, relatively intact environment, not very much to deal with in terms of invasive species and those things, you've got a real gem here. And it would be really unfortunate to see that destroyed over time. And since many of these kids are going to be the stewards, the long-term stewards of this island, it's all about connecting them and helping them feel some ownership for the place, but also helping them to understand the place. And that's, knowledge is power, and having that knowledge base for them to rely on when they're talking about conservation and whatever on this beautiful island gem, it's going to go so much further than without that knowledge.
In 2014, telemetry expert Erwin Winter visited Saba to conduct important research on shark movements in our local waters. His work involved the tagging of sharks around the island. With his team, he inserted transmitters inside a dozen sharks and placed receiving stations at key locations within the marine park. Those receivers have been collecting data for a year now. Last month, Erwin came back to the island to analyze the results.
Yeah, we came back now this year, and we read out the results of the past year, and it was we really had very nice results. Out of the 12 sharks, at least 7 are still around the island, and possibly 2 more. We're going to look for them. They might be in between stations, and there's a lot of variation, especially between the Caribbean reef sharks. Some are real local, like for instance one female that was only seen at the pinnacles for 9 months, and then it shifted to Shark Shoal, and the last 3 months we only saw it around Shark Shoal. So very local movements, but we also saw individuals that moved around a bit more around the island. For instance, one male, we saw it moving around the island for a few weeks, and then we didn't see it anymore. So perhaps, most likely explanation that it has left the island. And this year we not only read out the data of the 8 receivers, but we also placed 8 receivers around Statia, around St. Martin, and on the Saba bank. So that gives us a much wider network And if sharks are now moving between islands, we're going to detect that as well. So I'm looking forward to next year's readout. And then we're going to see what these sharks are doing. So these, the very local movement and high site fidelity of the Caribbean, of at least part of the Caribbean reef sharks and most of the nurse sharks we detect so far, shows that you can really protect sharks by designing small reserves or no-take zones. With the local efforts you can protect local populations. That seemed to be the first conclusion after 1 year of data. Of course we're going to collect more data, but well, it seems to head that way.
Not all experts are scientists, and Ken Niedermeyer is the perfect example. When Ken realized how distressed coral reefs were becoming, he decided to take action to help solve this big environmental issue.
I was a tropical fish collector in the Keys since the 70s, late 70s. Basically put my way through college collecting tropical fish and did it for 30 years after I got out of college. And I spent a lot of time in the water, and I watched the coral reefs of the Florida Keys pretty much just dying from a variety of things, and I didn't see anybody doing anything about it. And it became frustrating, and it became a threat to my ability to make a living as a tropical fish collector, because these habitats that the fish used to like to live in were now dead. You know, the corals had died, the whole reef had changed because the corals had died. The sea urchins died in 1983, so there was a lot of things happening, a lot of things changing, and I just felt like I got to do something about it. There's something, I can do something. And we started growing them, my daughter and I, as a 4-H project, thinking we were going to grow these corals and sell them to the aquarium trade. It's just another product, and we would be the only people in the United States that had this particular coral, the staghorn coral. And I thought, this is worth a lot of money, and I kept telling my daughter, we're going to make a ton of money, and this is going to be great. So we started growing them. We made sure everybody knew we were doing it. We were under the watchful eye of a lot of people because it had never been done, and I knew it'd get questioned. And I just started watching these corals, and I thought, what if we could put those on the reef? And it just, this whole life, whatever, I just had this whole change of heart, and I started growing the corals to put back on the reef. And so we started looking into that. And we tried a lot of things, and everything worked, but every step of the way I kept thinking there's got to be a faster, better way to grow these corals. There's got to be a more efficient way to do it. And so we tried growing them on discs, we tried them on like clotheslines, like they called it a line nursery. And then we got this idea of a tree, this design that we use now, and we tried it and just thought, oh, this is awesome, this is the way to do it. We actually wrote a paper, published it in a scientific journal, and gave the whole technology away because I wanted everybody, I said, this is a game changer. I've tried all these other things. This is a game changer, and I want people to be able to use it freely. So now we're taking it around the Caribbean. We've got 6 or 7 countries we're in right now doing coral nurseries. The goal all the time is to find somebody that's interested. Usually they come to us. Find the people with the passion. It's usually divers or dive shop owners, people that have been in the water a long time, have seen the change. They realize this ain't your mama's coral reef anymore. There's problems, and they see an opportunity to do something about it. So we work with them. Our goal is always to train them so that it becomes their program. So we have a program in Bonaire, one in Curacao, one in Jamaica, and we're growing them up so that their program is it's theirs. It's not ours. And if they own it, if you take ownership of something, then you invest the time and the energy to make it happen. If it's my project all the time, then you're not going to invest the time in my project. So anyways, we sent some of our trees down here ahead of time, some of our materials, and we set them up out on one of the reefs. And it was great. We worked with the local kids. We worked with some of the interns from some of the different programs down here. I think everybody got a little taste of it. The dive industry got a taste of it, and I think they want more. I think the kids are interested. The kids are going to look at this and say, wow, I can do something. I can do this. This isn't, I don't have to have a PhD. I don't even have to have a degree to do this, and this can make a really big difference. And so we're looking at ways to explore how to expand the program. This was more of a demonstration, what we did this last week, but I think there's a lot of opportunity to expand it. the water's clear here and the reefs look okay, but from what I can see looking around, they've been a lot better in the past, and they could be better in the future if we did something about it. So this is a simple, low-cost way to do something about it that is, for the people of Ceiba and for the people that come here to visit, something they can do. And I think it's a great opportunity for people in Ceiba to take ownership of this problem. What we'd like to propose is to expand the program. Right now we have 3 trees that we built and 4 that the Yelp kids built. We need to expand it to probably 20 to 30 trees. We need to have different genetic strains of some of these important corals growing on each tree. Just with 3 trees you can't really do much, but if we really want to make a difference, 20, 30 trees, you can start putting several thousand corals a year on the reef, and that can make a really big difference. These are fast-growing corals. They're easy to care for, and they're basically not going to reproduce and reseed the reefs on their own. There's just too many problems working against a natural recovery, but an assisted recovery could make a huge, huge difference. And so I could see in 2 years we'd have 20 trees producing 2,000 or 3,000 corals a year, and some of these dive sites are really going to perk up, and people are going to take an interest, and they're going to also say, what else can we do? And I have some other ideas. And it's been a real exciting adventure in my life. I can't think of a more fun that I've had than doing what I'm doing right now. I feel like I'm making a difference. I'm not even making money. I'm just making a difference, and that's so much more exciting than making money. People that make money or people that try to make money, they think that's all there is in life. And I think you get to a certain point in your life and you realize money isn't everything. Making a difference and enriching other people's life, giving back is much more rewarding than taking. So that's been my change of life.
After these inspiring words, it is time to say goodbye to See and Learn on Ceiba for 2015. Once again, we would like to say a big thanks to all the sponsors that help make See and Learn happen. From the volunteers who help out, to those who offer food and accommodation to our visiting experts, and on to the larger benefactors that donate the much-needed funds, without which See and Learn would not be able to take place. We hope that you enjoyed this year's events, and the See and Learn team looks forward to seeing you all next year for a lot more local environmental awareness.
What a wonderful